What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. Just got out of seeing writer-director Alex Garland's latest movie, Men, from A24, and I'm assuming it's going to be a slow rollout like most A24 movies, so I'm going to keep this review largely spoiler-free, at least until the very end, and if I go into any specifics, I'll give you fair warning, but Men, it's a brand new horror movie, and pretty much all my preconceived notions about what the movie was going to be turned out to be totally wrong, but here's what I can tell you about the premise based on what's presented to you in the trailer. So the plot's fairly simple. You have your protagonist played by Jessie Buckley, and she's absolutely incredible in this. And she's basically a grieving widow who's decided to go out to the country for a couple days just to clear her head after the suicide of her husband. And her relationship with her husband was very complicated, and that's a huge part of the movie, and it's a major through line throughout, so I'm not going to give any spoilers there. But when she arrives in this very quaint, very beautiful, old-fashioned English village, it becomes immediately apparent that there's something very strange about this place. And because the movie so often goes into these like dreamlike montages, sometimes it's hard to know what she's perceiving versus what's like the objective reality around her, which is part of the fun of the movie. It's a very mysterious, dreamlike movie. And I would say it's 2/3 of an astonishingly brilliant horror film. The final third was very confusing, very confounding, but the final third is so gross and so gory and features such astonishingly good special effects. Even though I stopped being emotionally invested in the story in the final third, I still couldn't stop looking at the screen. I couldn't believe the crazy shit I was seeing. But if I was to offer a review of the film, I would say ultimately it leaves you with a slightly unsatisfied feeling, because I don't mind mystery stacked upon mystery stacked upon mystery, but at a certain point, you got to throw your audience a bone and just kind of help them figure out what the fuck is going on with your story. And I think a lot of people are going to walk out of this movie scratching their heads, and that makes a lot of audience members mad. But what I can promise you is that it's one of the most stunningly beautiful horror films I've ever been exposed to. The cameraman, Rob Hardy, that Alex Garland's working with, he's so good, it'll make your head spin. I mean, I just sat back on multiple occasions just reveling in the pictorial beauty of this movie. I was just in awe of some of these, there's these long passages where she's just exploring the woods and around the village where she's staying, or just playing the piano and the camera's kind of wandering in and out. And you'll just be spellbound by the sheer beauty of the visual storytelling. And I doubt I'll see a better looking movie all year. So even if you're frustrated by the plot, at a minimum, you're going to love just the raw cinematic qualities of the movie. But most important of all, the movie delivers on the key ingredient of, is it scary? And at times, yes, it is scary as hell. I mean, you will laugh at the strangeness of it, but at the same time, be deeply disturbed by some really mysterious imagery and just this mounting sense of dread. And Jessie Buckley does a brilliant job of not just kind of screaming in reaction to everything. It's a very complex, emotionally moving performance. But the real treat of this movie, and the main reason why I'm going to urge everyone to check it out and form their own opinion, actor Rory Kinnear, well, he puts on 12 performances, because pretty much every single male except for Jessie Buckley's character's husband, but every other character is played by Rory Kinnear. And it's just actors will sit around their entire lives waiting and dreaming of a movie that will allow them to show off their talents in such a way, like a movie like Dr. Strangelove and Peter Sellers, where he got to play multiple parts. I'm not going to declare that Rory Kinnear is the next Peter Sellers, but he is incredible in this movie. And some of the parts that he plays, just odd country bumpkins, their strange kind of local humor, or weird wandering psychopaths, or the cops, or the bartenders, or vulgar little kids around town. But Rory Kinnear, his performance reminded me of a phrase in MMA where they always say, leave everything in the cage. Don't leave it up to the judges. Whatever you've got in your system, get it out there. And Rory Kinnear, he left it all in the cage with this movie, because even if he never made another movie ever again, people would be like, who was that Rory Kinnear guy? He was fucking brilliant. And it's so disturbing and amusing, and his chemistry with Jessie Buckley is incredible. I mean, like I said, while he has the showier role, her character goes on this remarkable emotional journey of a lot of like trauma and emotional scar tissue to dealing with a very real and physical present danger of somebody trying to get into her home, like this mysterious assailant that doesn't fully make sense from a rational perspective. And what I can promise is that by the end of the movie, you will feel like you have had an experience. Now, some people are talking about how it's great folk horror just because it takes place out in the boonies. Folk horror is very much in vogue these days. And if you want to call it folk horror, fine. I notice some critics are calling it elevated horror and art house horror and all that crap. I hate all these little subdivisions and categories of horror. Like I said before on this channel, for me, there are two kinds of horror. There's good horror and there's bad horror. And in the bad horror, it's a matter of degree. And same with the good. The question is, how good is Men? Like I said, it's 2/3 of a brilliant horror movie and 1/3 of just a really fucking disgusting, confusing one. But at a bare minimum, if you go out to see it with a group of people and you go out for drinks afterwards or go out to a meal, you're going to be talking about it. And so I think it's going to excite a lot of really fun debate and different interpretations. And that's a good thing. Art should be sometimes complicated and complex. And while maybe this is a situation where you've got like a snake eating its own tail, where there's not as much there as Alex Garland would like to believe, nonetheless, it's going to be fun trying to dissect what it all means for, over the next couple of days as I digest the movie. But what I really enjoyed is how the movie was surprising. I went into it thinking, oh, this is going to be some movie about how all men are scum or all men are misogynists and like the whole world's out to kill Jessie Buckley. And I thought it was going to be kind of a very tired, predictable movie on that front. And let's just say I could not have been more wrong about my initial, skepticism or suspicion about what the movie was ultimately going to be about. Alex Garland, he's a very surprising storyteller. So he's in a weird situation where he never delivers that complete and total outright masterpiece, but all of his movies and all of his shows have something really impressive to boast and brag about. I mean, if you look at his career, going back to his directorial debut with Ex Machina. Ex Machina has probably still been my favorite movie that he's done, but Annihilation had great ingredients. The show Devs, I thought was like 7 great episodes with one final terrible episode that kind of ruined the whole thing. And Men's got strokes of genius as well. And so I guess I'll take a flawed filmmaker who regularly and consistently delivers really interesting stuff, as opposed to someone who maybe gives you one great movie and then kind of diminishing returns for the rest. Because going back to friggin' 28 Days Later in 2002, I mean, it's 20 years now, Alex Garland has been delivering great stuff. Admittedly, 28 Days Later was just the script. Danny Boyle directed it. But he's one of those screenwriters who clearly was not content just to be a writer, even though a movie like Dread obviously really benefited from him on the scripting duties. And who knows, maybe it would have been an even better movie if he had directed it. But I'm in his corner all the way. He keeps coming up with cool original ideas. His next movie, something called Civil War, and the plot is under wraps. I don't know if that's based on a book or if it's an original creation, but I'll be there first in line, and I hope it's another A24 movie. And speaking of A24, as I was walking into this movie, I realized this is the 3rd movie by A24 that I'm seeing this year. Like, I really enjoyed X. X is probably my favorite A24 movie so far released this year. And then I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think I like what that movie was going for more than the final product. For my taste, it was just a little too silly and a little too goofy, but I recognize that a lot of people are having this like transcendent out-of-body experience watching it, so I'm not going to spoil anybody's good time. If you love that movie, more power to you. And I really enjoyed Men, and I'm going to be seeing Bodies, Bodies, Bodies when it comes out in August, which looks funny as fucking shit. So yeah, A24, they're on a serious hot streak. But also on top of all the great movies that A24 is cranking out, they're getting into cranking out shows as well. The French director Olivier Assayas, he's delivering a new Irma Vep show for them on June 6th, I think on HBO Max. And Irma Vep, I don't know if it's a continuation or a remake of his movie Irma Vep from the 1990s, but A24, everything they make at a minimum gets my curiosity. It appears on my radar. I don't necessarily like everything equal, but goddamn, they really take some big swings at their shows and movies. And so, yeah, they are a very reliable, independent entertainment company. So 2 final things before I wrap up this video. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know that a recurring theme is when I complain about movie theaters and theater goers. I'll say this, tonight I had about as good a movie-going experience as you can have. I went to the Village East by Angelica, in the East Village here in New York. And I always forget just how cool that theater is. They have a giant auditorium where they can play 70 millimeter movies. But the room I was in had great just like aesthetics and like exposed brick. And the crowd, you could tell, they were just a bunch of movie freaks, like diehard, like A24 fanatics, where they were there to see the movie. They weren't there to talk to their friends. They weren't there to fuck around on their phones. They weren't there to show up late. They were there to get the full Alex Garland experience. And I felt like I was with my people. And so, yeah, I don't want to jinx The Village East by Angelica by singing its praises, but goddamn, if you live in the New York area and you're looking for a great movie theater to go to, it gets my highest possible recommendation. And one final note about Alex Garland, I owe him a debt of gratitude, and I've mentioned this before on this channel, but I became obsessed with From Software video games because of him, because I first tried Dark Souls back in like 2011, and it kicked my butt for a few hours, and I basically threw out my controller in despair. But then I was watching an interview with him when he was promoting Ex Machina. He was talking about how much he loved Dark Souls and all the customization options and its replayability. So I went back, got addicted to Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, got addicted to Sekiro, and now I'm playing Elden Ring like a madman. I mean, a few months after its release, I'm still playing Elden Ring hours per week, if not every day. And maybe that's hurt my output on this channel, but I owe it all to Alex Garland, so thank you for insisting that I go back and check out From Software games with a more kind of critical eye, and yeah, they're the best in the business as far as I'm concerned. And Alex Garland, he continues to impress me as a writer and a director, and I think there's evidence in Men that artistically he's still evolving, he's still growing, or maybe that's just because he had the good sense to team up with one of the best damn cameramen you could possibly have in Rob Hardy. But whoever deserves the credit, Men is an interesting movie. I recommend people check it out. I just can't promise that everybody's going to have the same experience because that last third is just going to be very divisive. At any rate, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. If you want to talk more about Alex Garland or A24 or horror films or whatever, please leave a comment in the comments below or hunt me down on Twitter at Geeking Out. And remember to like, favorite, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Hope everyone has a great weekend, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.